in my backyard, and today we're going to be talking with Maury Whitney, who is a railroad buff. You may have listened to some of our previous shows, but I have found him so interesting to listen to that we've brought him back again. And so, Maury, today what I'd like to talk about is your favorite experiences on riding the trains, because I know you've got a lot of memories. And then also some of the memories that you have of some of maybe the catastrophes that we've seen along the way. I know that, you know, Keene has had a few things, like I remember there was a hog train that fell in what was this, on Wickham Mill Road or something?
Yeah.
But why don't you just tell us a little bit about your experiences?
Well, my experiences was, the one that I can really get the first of was in 1942. My uncle lived up in Heartland, Vermont, and previous to that, during the late 30s, as soon as all of the kids in the family got out of school, they were shipped off up to my uncle's farm. And what that accomplished was, there was 6 of us children in the family. That was 6 less mouths for my mother and father to feed during the tough Depression years. Yeah,
and 12 more hands.
And my uncle got 6 free hands.
Right.
And well, our pay was after about the last, and you get out of school one day and you're gone.
Wow.
And you weren't brought back until the day before. So, but to pay for us, give us our pay at the end of the summer, we'd go down. He was up on Route 12 in Heartland. Take us down to Windsor. And shop us for clothing, get back to school. And that was our pay. But it was really a good experience. But in 1942, I think it was, my sister and I just took a trip up there to visit and whatnot for a few days. And on our way back, we boarded the train in Windsor. And on our way back, we got to Claremont Junction. And the train pulled off onto a siding, and we sat there for about 4 hours.
Did you know what was going on?
We didn't at the time, but we found out later on. So by the time we got to Bellas Falls, we were 4 hours late to catch the train and come back to Keene. We changed trains there. So we spent another 4 hours in Bellas Falls before the next train came through. And what it was during the war years, and there was some freights, express freights to come through, and that was more important than the passengers. Yeah. But we didn't find that out for 2 or 3 years later. And but it was quite an experience. And then another experience I had was really nice, was traveling this line right here.
And this is the Ashuelot line.
Yeah. And from Keene to West Swanzey, my mother had family there, and we'd travel. And so I'd always sit on the window side and watch out, see everything that's going by. And when my mom got to where she wanted to go, I just tell her I want to go down to the depot and watch the trains go by.
Yeah.
And so. Anytime I was ever missing, even when I was in Keene, she'd always know where I was. Yeah. But there were, in the early days, from particularly around 1860 to 1880, the method of tying the rails down wasn't good enough so that the rails would get loose from the ties. And they used to call them iron snakes. They would come right up through the passenger's floor.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and there was a number. And then prior to their getting, I would say probably around 1890, they got the coal stoves. They had a fat-bellied stove in each one of the cars to keep me up, to keep them warm. And so anytime that Pullman car is turned over or anything else, you got fire. Right. And so more people actually died from the fires than from actually the accident itself. Right. Because they'd be pinned in the wreckage, and then along comes the fire and just doesn't mess on everything. Yeah, I can't imagine having a wood fire or a coal fire going in a train moving. Yeah. And then having it go out. I mean, oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you? I don't know. Just.
But at that time they didn't have locomotive boilers large enough to give them the steam for the
heat
for the train and heat besides.
Yeah, yeah.
Later on, when they got enough larger boilers, they could supply the extra steam for steam heat in the cars. And and then there were accidents and collisions. The communication between the train on the road and the train master at the depot was such that they had telegraph. In fact, that was one of the things that no matter where the railroad went, the telegraph went along beside it. It was
for
always,
a good reason.
There was always telephone poles right alongside the railroad.
Yeah.
And but they were quite frequent. And then they had some runaway car. In fact, they had several of them right here in Keene. There was one of real notice. There was a passenger train that had stopped at the State Line depot, which is at the just below Fitzwilliam, and there was a depot there with a siding, and the passenger train left the depot, and he got up to speed of about 40 miles an hour, and there was a work crew up on the rails where there was a steep grade just south of Fitzwilliam, and two cars broke away from the work train, and they collided on a cut in a curve. I could never actually find the exact spot where that happened, but they hit with such force that the second car that was traveling loose was catapulted over the passenger train and about 200 feet down the track.
Wow.
And then they had one that was on the summit in Keene. A car got away from the locomotive, and it kind of seesawed back and forth. It went because Keene's in a flat hollow, and with mountains on both sides. It came down through Keene, went up the other side, probably up to about as far as Webb Depot, and then rolled back again and halfway up the summit. And before they could slow it down enough, before it slowed down enough so that they could get a hold of it. And then there was another one. They were loading wood, I believe, on a locomotive tender somewhere down near Webb Depot, and one of the cars there got away and rolled into Keene. Well, they could notify them that there was something coming, and fortunately, well, at that time there wasn't much traffic across the rails anyhow. It was all pedestrian, no automobiles, and they let them know that it was coming, and that one started to seesaw, but I believe they sent a locomotive after that and cornered that out in around West Keene somewhere.
So how would they slow it down? Did they have another car or something that had a cushion on it or something?
No. The only what they had to do is they had, at that time, the brakes were all. They had a big wheel on the top of it, or so. So
it wasn't like you just pulled it like this.
No.
Wow.
No, they had to
wheel it on.
But the biggest problem was that they had to get on it first, and and the thing was traveling right along. Yeah. So, but they have been, and then there was the great hog train that had two locomotives on it, and that derailed somewhere out in West Keene between.
I think it was over near Stonewall Farm somewhere, from what I understand. Yeah,
well, that would be on West Street, and it was somewhere between Whitcomb Mill Road and West Street, and I think it was closer to Whitcomb Mill Road, and but that was, and it was funny that there's a photograph of that in the Cheshire County Historical Society. Shows the two locomotives turned over in one of the cars, I guess. And the spectators that went to see the wreck parked their bicycles on the side, and there was a whole ton of bicycles.
I've seen that picture. Yeah.
So we not only had rail and horse traffic, we also had bicycle traffic.
Right.
And that was a good way to get around.
Yeah. And you just mentioned, just quickly, if you're interested in information about local railroads too, you can go to the Historical Society in Cheshire County, and they have quite a few books.
Yes, they have a lot of real good books.
Right.
And there's a number of small books that gosh, can't think of his name now. Proctor. Oh gosh, what's his name? Gosh.
Well, the books are at the Historical Society.
They are.
So I'm sure that they can help people. Yeah.
They'll help anybody that comes in there. You just tell them what you want, and they'll either set you right to it or get it for you.
Yeah, because what spurred my interest in the railroads is that they did a van tour. And they followed the Webb Depot down into like Athol, into that area, Fitzwilliam and that area. And it was really interesting because they talked about the granite quarries and how they had something to do with all of this, as well as the different railroad lines. And a lot of them, you would never ever think that there would be a railroad going through some of these areas.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you're interested in more information, please feel free to stop down there as well. So yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned it before or not, but the Fitchburg branch, which was the one that goes through Keene, was not supposed to come up through Fitzwilliam and Troy. It was supposed to come closer to this line here because the grade was better, but mainly there were hardly any huge cuts that they had to make, like they had to make through Fitzwilliam in that area.
Yeah, lots of rock.
But there was a wealthy stockholder that I believe he owned a Fitzwilliam Inn at that time that said, we'd like you to come.
Right, again, money.
Yeah. But even then they couldn't get within, I guess it's about a mile from the town of Fitzwilliam to the depot.
It's way out. Yeah.
And there again, it was because of the lay of the ground there that they couldn't do anything with it. But a lot of people would came into Jaffrey and even into Troy that were going to climb Mount Monadnock, which is one of the most climbed mountains in the world.
Yeah.
It's really quite accessible. And
so what is one of your favorite trips, do you think, that you've ever taken? And did you ever eat on the trains?
No, never eat on the. There was a guy that I forget what they called him. He had almost like a sandwich man, but he had a little thing here, and he sold crackers and a little bit of cookies and stuff like that. But no, I think my most interesting trip was going on the Cheshire. That was the 3 Bud car aluminum train that came into Keene.
Yeah.
And my brother Hollis, he's 5 years older than I am, and he just got out of the service, and in 1946, and he was quite particular about his clothes and stuff, and so he wanted to go to Boston to buy his clothes. So we hopped on the Cheshire, and that was the train at the time. And I think, I can't remember, but I think we made 2 or 3 trips there on that train at the same time. And I think that was the most exciting one. However, I did have one that was really, really exciting. And I went down to the railroad yards, and I was always down there anyhow. And the guys looked like they were getting ready to go somewhere. And I said, "What the heck's going on, you guys?" "Oh," he says, "we got this work train going up to Walpole." He says, "We got some work to do." And I said, "Geez, can I go with you?" And they talked it over. Yeah. And so they set me in the cab of the locomotive.
Nice.
Yeah. And we puffed along until they drop off ties here and and some other rail fixtures.
You're in heaven.
Yeah. And so we got to Walpole, and I got home. I was gone all day. And I'm sure my mother came down to the railroad yard looking for me.
Yeah.
Couldn't find me.
Well, you were on the railroad, but not where she think to find you. Yeah.
Here I am. I get ready to go home, and I'm just covered with soot, black and everything else. I was like, oh boy. So I got home, walked in the house. My mother said, "Where have you been?" And I says, oh, I just been down to the railroad shops. There were guys down there were firing up the locomotives. And she says, well, you better get cleaned up, she said. So a school chum of mine and a good friend, John Young, he was into model railroading at that time. This was probably in about 1940, 43 or 4, somewhere in there. And I was talking to him. I said, boy, I took a nice trip on the... He says, why didn't you come and get me? I said, I didn't have time to do anything. I had to get on the train and go.
Right.
And I said, but I think in a couple of weeks they're going to make another run. I said, I heard him talking there. And he says, well, if they are, he says, you come and get me and make sure. I said, well, a couple of weeks, I said, we'll go down to keep going down to the station. So finally we did. We got another work train, and both John Young and I went on it.
Nice.
Yeah, and we had a heck of a time on the way up and back, kids. And we got back to the rail yard.
And how old were you again then?
I would probably have been about 12, 13. Yeah.
Oh, did your mother know where you were going this time?
No.
Oh, gosh.
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, I wasn't too secretive with what I told my mother, but, on something like that, So, I mean, because here's what I told John. We got ready to walk home. We're kind of dirty and everything else. I said, John, don't you breathe a word of this. I said, because if my mother hears about this, I'm going to be murdered. And John said to me, he says, don't worry. He says, I'm not going to say anything. My mother would do the same. So it was, I don't know, probably about 6 years now. John Young passed away. He lived down in Mendon, Massachusetts. And I went to his funeral, and I kind of asked of his family, did he mention anything like that?
Yeah.
And none of them said no.
No.
And so
took it to his grave.
Yeah. It kind of impressed me as much as to say, his 2 kids that vying secrecy, pledging secrecy, and it stayed that way for their whole life.
Yeah.
And it was that was something.
Yeah.
But no, we'd John and I were almost living at the railroad yard there for a while, and then I guess John went off onto something else. Well, he was building a model railroad, and I didn't have the money to do that anyhow. I don't know where he got his money either. But it was those are some of the things you can remember as from a child. Now, Winchendon used to be quite popular back in the late 30s, and they had a dance hall there, and they had I guess you call it a beer joint, but they had a more or less dancing outside of the hall. It would be and there were 2 or 3 places that had dancing there, and so. When my dad and mother would go down there, they always had to take me and my younger brother. My other brothers and sisters were old enough so that they could be left behind.
But you couldn't, because you could only go on a train for the whole day.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, something they probably get locked up and thrown in jail if they did this today. I mean, so they'd get off the train and leave us kids sitting on the benches outside, until
it's a different time.
Yeah, until the next train comes going north.
Yeah, yeah.
and so we just watch all the train, and there was a lot of yard activity going on at that time too, and what they have to do in the yard is they have to shift the cars that have been dropped off as to whether they're going to be sent to this business or that business or another manufacturing place or whatever.
Yep.
And so we just sit there and watch the train show, so to speak.
Right. It's like watching television. It's just real life. That's all.
And so I mean, it didn't cost hardly anything at all. I forget what the fare was. Probably about 15 cents or more. And to go from Keene to Winchendon, and there was a lot of that done at that period of time.
Right.
Because you couldn't get gas. From the
because you had the war going on.
Yeah. You couldn't get gas, you couldn't get tires, you couldn't get anything else. If your battery went down, you'd have to be probably a month without a battery before you could get one.
Right.
And so there would be a lot of short trips taken by
trail.
By train.
Yeah.
And it was a different type of social behavior at that time. I mean, you could leave a child or something, sitting in a car, and I mean, and I think today, gee, we sat in, when we did get a car, I can remember we sat in the car while my folks went and did their grocery shopping or something like that, and I felt we were smart enough that if something was going to happen
Common
to us
sense.
in the car, we'd know enough to open up the door and get out.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
But I mean, kids today don't even, they think of getting something like that.
Yeah.
But no, today, and not only that, but there's a lot of car theft from people leaving the keys.
Right.
Yeah, even right in the vehicle.
I know. Well, it's really funny because I think it was a different time.
Yeah.
I think that people really appreciated having the railway because you were able to get from place to place, because before you had horses. I mean,
yeah.
Horses. Can you imagine riding a horse nowadays to get someplace?
Yeah.
And it gave people independence to be able to go where they needed to go. And, again, it's a different time.
You mentioned horses. The horses right now are getting kicked off the trail.
On the rail trails?
Yeah. They can only go on certain trails, and most of them aren't hardly anywhere they want to go because and the law states that they got to clean up after the horses.
Well, how are you going to do that? They probably did it down the road. Anyway. But no, one of the things that is really nice, though, is that we do have the rails in Keene still. Not that we have the rails, but we have the trails that people can enjoy.
When they first started abandoning all the rails in the state here, I said, geez, it's too bad the state doesn't buy them up or whatever, and they wouldn't have had to spend much money because a good share of them could have been taken over for tax debts.
Right. Yeah.
But nobody was interested in that. They wanted to get rid of the railroad, but this is just beautiful. I hope it never ends. I hope they can keep it up to.
Yeah. Well, the trail that we're on today here is the Ashuelot Rail Trail, and it starts at the center of Keene, down in town, and then, as far as I understand it, I think it goes through up to Hinsdale right now. I'm not sure that it goes all the way to Northfield now, but I know that it goes through Swanzey, and Swanzey has done a lot of work to keep the rail trail going. I know that they've had grants and they've put down hard pack, and it's very, very level, so it's really a great place for people. And you can also, you can horseback ride on these. There's snowmobiling in the winter, and they have a club that takes care of all of the trails. So I come along here quite often, and we'll go snowshoeing in the winter. And it's great because the snowmobilers have been through, so they kind of make your path. Although as a snowshoer, it's kind of nice to go in the fluffy snow. What else? Bicyclers. We've seen a couple of joggers coming through here. Yeah. So it's open. It seems very safe, to walk through. And there's so many people that use it that, really, it's a place to be.
Yeah, this trail here, I would have expected it anyhow, but this trail here is very level.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, the whole length of it is not, is almost like, I don't know if you can see up behind us or not, but it's very level, and it was kind of built that way. From what I understand, it was kind of built that way so that they could use just one locomotive on it instead of two.
Yep.
And, but it wouldn't be like going up to the summit out of Keene.
Right. No.
I mean, that's about a 350-foot climb.
Yeah. So if anybody wants a nice walk, they can travel on here. You can also go to Criff Road and park out by the college entrance to the athletic fields and get on the trails here too. I've seen families riding their bikes all the way through down to where the Pine Street is down in West Swanzey. So it's really a great place to go. So you can still, even though you can't ride the trains anymore, you can still feel like what it was like being on the rails.
You've traveled the rail. Are there places where that you can stop for maybe a hot dog or something like that?
Down here?
Yeah.
Now?
Yeah.
No.
No, there's nothing.
No, not enough. You have to wait until you get to Keene.
Yeah.
But
and other than that, you have to go hide behind a tree.
yeah. Never have to think about that because I live so close. But yeah.
Okay.
But no, it's a great place to go though.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you get a chance to come out and go on the trails, you really should. And I know that there's all kinds of railroads, because how many railroads were there coming into Keene?
Oh gosh, there was about 6.
Yeah, so there's 6 choices.
Well, there was the lines. There were only 1, 2, 3 lines, but there were 6 companies that did the that took over the Hancock line. Well, it isn't actually the Hancock. It was originally the Manchester Keene line, and that they wanted to build that originally. They wanted to build that just to fit in with this one here, to get to northern New Hampshire. But instead of going to northern New Hampshire, it went to southern New Hampshire.
How did that happen?
Well,
you know what, Maury?
Money.
Money and everything. You know what?
Half an hour gone by.
I've gone by again.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So I guess I'll blow the whistle.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we've had another show of In My Backyard.
On the railroad track.
On the railroad track here in Keene on the Ashuelot Rail Trail. So if you're interested in more information about In My Backyard, or getting a hold of Maury to learn a little bit more about the railroads in Keene, you can email us, and our email address is inmybackyardch8@gmail.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So thank you for joining us today on the rail trail. And did they used to say anything? All aboard?
Yeah, that's what the conductor would say.
All right.
All aboard! And he ruled the train. Everybody thought the engineer ruled the train, but it wasn't. It was the conductor.
All right. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you again soon in My Backyard.